When you think about building a world from scratch, you usually picture like a novelist staring at a blank page, right? Or maybe a city planner looking at some massive patch of empty land.
Right, yeah, huge undertaking.
Exactly. But there is a completely different kind of world building that happens, right in people's living rooms. You take a glass box, you fill it with water, you introduce life, and suddenly, well, you are the architect of a tiny enclosed universe.
Oh, absolutely. It's high-stakes microcosm management. You are playing the role of this completely benevolent, yet entirely responsible creator.
Yeah, and the margin for error in a closed loop like that is practically zero. Every single decision you make, every plant you add, every little variable you tweak, it can mean the difference between this thriving metropolis and, well, a total systemic
It
collapse.
really is a fragile balance.
Which brings us to a system that is currently on the brink of collapse. Today on the deep dive, we are unpacking a single, highly detailed entry from a serial log called Notes on Fishkeeping.
It's such a fascinating source.
It really is. The author, who goes by Ang, published this specific entry on May 18th, 2026. And the detail that immediately grabbed me, the thing that just blew my mind, is that we are dropping right into part 259 of this journal.
I mean, the sheer scale of the documentation is just staggering. We aren't looking at someone who bought a goldfish, threw in a plastic castle, and, forgot about it.
Right. Definitely not a plastic castle kind of setup.
Not at all.
Right.
We are looking at an ongoing, rigorous scientific experiment. Ang is actively applying the scientific method right there in their living room.
It's amazing.
This log is a meticulous record of continuous observation, hypothesis generation, and really precise biological intervention.
And the core drama unfolding here in Part 259 is a full-blown rescue mission. I mean, we have a specific plant that is actively starving.
Yeah, real crisis.
We have a ruthless competitor involved in this major turf war, and it is entirely up to Ang to step in and restore the balance of this glass universe.
So let's start by analyzing the patient in this rescue mission, so to speak. Because to understand the stakes, we really have to look at the botanical history. The subject here is the water pennywort.
Scientifically known as Hydrocotyle verticillata, right?
That's the one.
Ang provides a very clear visual description of its current state. The water pennywort has these really distinctive umbrella-like round leaves.
They are very pretty usually.
But right now, the edges of those round leaves have turned this pale, sickly yellow. And Ang identifies this not just as like random discoloration, but as a specific symptom of nutrient starvation.
And this is where Ang's rigorous documentation really proves its worth. Because Ang notes this current starvation is a direct follow-up to an older experiment, one documented 55 posts ago in Part 204.
Wow, 55 posts ago.
Yeah, back then, Ang began the process of adapting this specific water pennywort to semi-aquatic life.
Okay, that detail really caught my eye, but I need you to break down the mechanics of it for me. Why is adapting to a semi-aquatic lifestyle such a big deal? I mean, plants grow in water all the time, don't they?
Well, yeah, but moving a plant between an immersed state, meaning it's grown in the air above water, to a submersed semi-aquatic state is a massive metabolic shock.
Oh, really? Massive shock.
Oh, yeah. The plant fundamentally has to reconstruct its anatomy. When a leaf grows in the air, it develops this thick, waxy cuticle to prevent water loss.
Okay, that makes sense.
And its stomata, the little pores it uses to breathe, they're arranged specifically for atmospheric gas exchange. But when you plunge that plant underwater, that waxy cuticle suddenly becomes a barrier.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it completely prevents the plant from absorbing dissolved nutrients from the water.
So the plant essentially has to, shed its skin and grow a completely new one.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It has to grow entirely new types of leaves. It expends an immense amount of internal energy synthesizing thinner leaves with completely different cellular structures just to survive the new medium.
Wow.
It's a period of extreme vulnerability. The plant's internal energy reserves are just being drained just to acclimate.
That makes the visual of those yellow edges make so much more sense now. It reminds me of the check engine light on a car dashboard flashing on.
That's a great way to put it.
You're cruising along and suddenly this localized external warning sign pops up, signaling a massive internal systemic failure. But wait, why just the edges? If the plant is starving, why doesn't the whole leaf just turn yellow and die all at once?
That comes down to nutrient mobility.
Yeah.
Certain elements, like nitrogen, are highly mobile within a plant's vascular system.
Okay.
So when the water pennywort realizes it is running out of food and its core survival is threatened, It performs a kind of, well, a botanical triage.
Botanical triage. That sounds dramatic.
It is. It actively pulls those mobile nutrients away from the oldest outermost tissues, which are the edges of the leaves, and it redirects them to the apical meristem.
The apical meristem.
Yeah, that's the core where new growth happens.
Right, so it's cannibalizing itself just to keep its vital organs functioning?
Exactly. That phenomenon is called chlorosis. The pale yellow is the visual manifestation of a plant running on empty, basically sacrificing its extremities to save its core.
That is wild.
And noticing that subtle color shift, and then immediately linking it to the energy deficit created by an adaptation experiment started 2 months ago. I mean, that requires a deeply diagnostic mindset.
Definitely.
Most people see a yellow leaf and think they just have a brown thumb. But Aang reads the ecosystem.
But, you know, a check engine light only tells you something is broken, right? It doesn't tell you what caused the engine to fail in the first place.
Right, the root cause.
Exactly. Aang knows the Pennywort is starving, so the investigation shifts to the cause. And the root cause identified here is overcrowding and intense competition. And this is where the antagonist of Part 259 enters the picture.
The Common Salvinia.
Yes, the Common Salvinia. Now, you're the expert here. What is this thing?
So the Salvinia is a floating fern, and Aang describes it in this entry as being incredibly dense.
Yeah, incredibly dense. Aang notes the Salvinia is known for choking out other species by doing two specific things. It blocks light and it blocks surface gas exchange.
Right.
Now, I have to push back on the word choking here, because when I read that, I pictured like thick ivy vines physically wrapping around a tree trunk, squeezing it, pulling it down.
Oh, like actual strangulation.
Right. But looking at the mechanics, Aang describes this isn't physical strangulation at all. The Salvinia is just floating at the top.
Yeah, it never actually touches the water pennywort. It is purely environmental manipulation.
It's like being in the front row of a concert and someone suddenly pitches a dark, heavy, airtight tent directly over your head.
That is terrifying, but yes.
Nobody is laying a finger on you, but you can't see the stage, and pretty soon you're going to pass out from lack of oxygen.
And the physics of that dual threat mechanism are just devastating in an aquarium setting. Let's look at that first blow, the blocking of the light.
Okay, let's get into it.
The Salvinia is operating right at the surface, multiplying rapidly and forming this dense biological ceiling. Now, the water pennywort, which is already stressed and burning energy trying to adapt to semi-aquatic life, it desperately relies on PAR.
PAR.
Photosynthetically active radiation. It needs those specific light wavelengths penetrating the water column to generate energy. But the Salvinia intercepts all that light before it ever reaches the submersed plants.
Man, so it effectively cuts the power line to a plant that is already operating on a drained battery.
That's exactly it. And the second blow is arguably much more insidious.
Like in the gas exchange.
Right. Blocking the surface gas exchange degrades the entire chemical foundation of the tank. In any aquatic ecosystem, the surface of the water, that tiny boundary layer where air meets liquid, that is where the magic happens.
How so?
It's where atmospheric oxygen actually dissolves into the water. And more importantly, it is where carbon dioxide and toxic gases like ammonia off-gas out of the water.
So the water literally breathes at the surface.
It has to. And gas exchange relies on surface agitation to break the tension and allow those molecules to swap.
Oh, I see.
When the common Salvinia becomes incredibly dense, its leaves interlock. It acts exactly like a physical lid. It dampens surface agitation to zero. The water beneath it becomes completely stagnant, and the boundary layer is just sealed off.
Which means the oxygen levels plummet and the toxic gases get completely trapped inside the tank.
Right. The environment turns hypoxic, and then the beneficial aerobic bacteria in the filter, which need oxygen to process waste, they start dying off too.
Oh, wow. A domino effect?
Exactly.
Oh.
So the pennywort isn't just starving for light, it is suffocating in a degrading chemical soup.
It's a lethal combination. I mean, the pennywort is trapped. It can't uproot itself and walk to a sunnier spot. It's in a glass box.
No, it's totally stuck.
But it's also important, I think, we don't frame the common Salvinia as some kind of malicious villain here.
Oh, absolutely not. Biology has no morality.
Right, it doesn't know it's being the bad guy.
The Salvinia is simply a highly efficient, opportunistic competitor. It found an environment with ample surface nutrients, perfect lighting, and zero natural predators.
So it just went crazy.
Yeah, it did exactly what it evolved to do, which is spread aggressively and dominate the surface area to ensure its own survival.
It's winning the turf war. It doesn't know it's in a living room. It just knows it's thriving.
Exactly.
But Aang is the architect of this world, and letting the Salvinia wipe out the Pennywort means ecosystem failure. So Aang has to intervene.
And this is the best part.
Right.
Right.
Because observation led to a diagnosis. The diagnosis identified the mechanism of starvation, and now we need a solution.
You know, the instinct for a lot of beginners in that situation is total eradication. They panic, they grab a net, and they scoop out every single piece of Salvinia.
Oh, yeah, I would probably do that.
Or worse, they pour algaecides or chemical treatments straight into the water column.
Which would probably just shock the already vulnerable Pennywort and crash the whole tank.
Exactly. It would be a disaster. But instead, Aang's solution is brilliant in its simplicity, its mechanical isolation.
Okay, so Aang introduces a mesh basket. And again, the sequential nature of this log really shines here. Aang points out this specific mesh basket was thoughtfully introduced a few entries prior, back in part 257.
The continuity is so satisfying.
It is. But wait, I'm stuck on the mechanics of this basket. If the Salvinia is a floating plant, how does a basket actually stop it? I mean, doesn't the basket just sink to the bottom, or don't the plants just float right over the rim?
Well, Aang is using a floating mesh barrier.
A floating barrier.
Yeah. Imagine a shallow, buoyant ring with netting suspended in the middle, and it just sits right there at the water surface. It leverages the surface tension.
Oh, okay. So the action plan is to manually clear the dense Salvinia, scoop it up, and corral it directly into this floating mesh basket.
Right.
You are isolating it from the airspace above the Water Pennywort.
It physically restricts the vegetative spread. The Salvinia can multiply all at once inside the confines of the basket, but it hits a physical wall and just can't carpet the entire surface of the aquarium anymore.
It's like, managing a highly aggressive player in a hockey game.
A hockey game.
Yeah, think about it. The player is dominating the ice, checking everyone, causing absolute chaos. You don't ban them from the arena forever because you want them on the team, but you put them in the penalty box.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You strictly contain their area of influence. By putting the Salvinia in the penalty box, the Water Pennywort can finally see the stage lights again, get some fresh air, and, start photosynthesizing.
The elegance of that spatial management is profound, really, because the mesh basket allows the water to flow freely through it.
Which is crucial, right?
Very. It doesn't obstruct the tank's filtration current. That means the dissolved oxygen can still circulate, and the chemical makeup of the water isn't drastically altered by sudden changes.
It's just a strictly mechanical solution to a biological problem.
Precisely. It preserves the biodiversity of the tank. Aang doesn't want to destroy the Salvinia, just manage the terms of its coexistence with the Pennywort.
A good steward of a microcosm knows that balance is always superior to eradication.
Well said.
And the mesh basket enforces the boundaries of that balance. So we have the yellow edge symptoms, the light and gas blocking diagnosis, the highly efficient competitor, and the elegant mechanical intervention.
All in one entry.
Which brings us to the end of Aang's entry for May 18th, 2026. Aang signs off the post by writing, "Let's see if this does the trick over the coming days," and then simply, "till the next post."
That sign-off perfectly captures the fundamental reality of any scientific endeavor. You introduce a new variable into the system, in this case, the spatial containment of the Salvinia, and then you just have to step back. You wait.
Because you can't rush biology, right?
Not at all.
The Water Pennywort didn't cannibalize its own leaves overnight, and it's certainly not going to suddenly turn lush and green by tomorrow morning.
The intervention is merely the starting line for the next phase of observation. The system needs time to actually process the newly available light and the restored gas exchange.
Let's briefly recap this journey for everyone, because the methodology here is just incredible.
It really is a great case study.
It started with a subtle visual cue, those pale yellow edges on the round leaves. From there, Aang dug into the historical data, identifying the metabolic stress from the Part 204 semi-aquatic adaptation.
A foundational problem.
Right. And that led to uncovering the massive light and gas blockade caused by the interlocking leaves of the Common Salvinia. And finally, the measured, non-destructive intervention.
Using the mesh basket from Part 257.
Exactly, using it to enforce spatial boundaries and restore the biological balance.
It really serves as a masterclass in systematic problem solving. When a complex system starts failing, the human instinct is just to panic.
Oh, totally.
We want to rip everything out or make massive sweeping changes to try and fix it instantly.
Yeah.
But Aang models the discipline of incremental adjustment.
It really makes you think about how we manage the complex systems in our own lives, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
We all have our own ecosystems, our workflows, our relationships, our daily habits. And just like Aang, we have to learn to read the room. You look for the localized warning signs.
The yellow edges.
Right, the yellow edges. You don't just put a Band-Aid on a symptom, you dig down to understand the actual mechanics of the blockage. And when you find the problem, you apply a measured, contained fix. You put it in a basket and you patiently wait for the system to recalibrate.
Because troubleshooting requires understanding how all the pieces interact, rather than just reacting to the loudest, most obvious problem.
Exactly. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into Aang's glass universe, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that builds directly on the fascinating biology of the Common Salvinia.
That's a great metaphor.
Think about the mechanics of how it was winning that turf war. It wasn't toxic. It wasn't actively attacking the Water Pennywort.
It was just exist.
It thrived so intensely, simply by taking up space. It quietly floated at the surface, multiplying until it blocked the light, and completely sealed off the fresh air from everything living beneath it.
The most dangerous disruptions are often the ones that feel entirely natural to the environment, at least until it's too late.
So look closely at your own ecosystem. What dense, overgrown elements might be quietly acting as your own Common Salvinia?
That's a powerful question.
What habits, what endless obligations, or what digital distractions are sitting right at the surface of your day? They might not seem harmful on their own, but are they interlocking to block your light? Are they sealing off your metaphorical gas exchange, trapping the stale air and preventing you from breathing?
Something to think about.
What is quietly crowding your mind and causing your own pale yellow edges before you even notice you're starving? Just like building a world in a glass box, survival comes down to managing the balance. Keep observing your own world closely.